This month, we are celebrating Culinary Arts Month on Cura Conversations, Tales of Hospitality Excellence, and I have four exciting guests with over 75 years of combined culinary experience. They will be speaking about common culinary myths we all hear. Chef Paris Perez is the food service director for Cura Hospitality at Menno Haven Retirement Communities and has over 11 years of experience. Chef Chris Cormier is the Operations Support Manager for Cura Hospitality and has over 13 years of experience. Chef Lance Franklin is the Corporate Executive Chef for Cura Hospitality and has over 25 years of experience. And finally, Chef Jason Clark is the Corporate Executive Chef for Cura Hospitality and has over 28 years of experience. Let's get started debunking some of these myths. First, I would like to welcome Chef Paris to Cura Conversations, Tales of Hospitality Excellence. Thank you for joining us, Chef Paris. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into cooking?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. So I started cooking when I was 14. Both my parents were actually chefs. So I kind of grew up in that realm. I started cooking when I was 14. My grandmother owned a small restaurant in a little town in Maryland. I used to get off the school bus there, did my homework, and then I washed dishes. And in that time washing dishes, I realized that I wanted to do what the cooks were doing over on the other side of the kitchen. So slowly I started working my way over and learning that. I left there and I was actually a barbecue pit master for 10 years. So that was where I based most of my experience and knowledge from, would be in barbecue. So a little bit unique there. And then recently, 2 years ago, I worked at a company in Frederick, a retirement community, and got my start in this field a little bit. And then in May of 24, I made the move to start with Elior on the Cura Hospitality segment. So a little over a year, I've been working for Cura. So that's a little bit of kind of my background and where I come from.
Awesome. And congratulations on hitting your year with us. So thank you for everything over that past year. And, really great hearing that you're continuing that, the line of culinarians in your family, having both your parents be, chefs is quite amazing that you didn't run away from it and that you
No.
embraced it. So kudos to you.
Yes.
Moving on to some of the questions that we hear and myths that we hear, one is that you can keep meat moist by cooking it in a liquid, like a braising or stewing it, and that it won't get dry or tough. Is that true?
I think it is true for myself. I think one of the common misconceptions with that is that a lot of people think just because you're cooking meat in a liquid that it's not going to dry out no matter how long you cook it. So, like with poaching, stewing, braising, I think you definitely can keep meats moist in liquids. It's just about how effectively you cook them, and again, like I said, I know a lot of people who think it's in liquid, it's not going to dry out, and that is absolutely not true.
Gotcha. So it sounds like the braising, the stewing, the cooking in liquids will help, but you still have to be mindful of how long you're cooking it for.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Perfect. And now, out of all the questions I'm going to ask people throughout this podcast, this is probably the most controversial one that I feel that I'm going to ask, and you're lucky because you get it. But searing a piece of meat, does it truly seal in the juices?
It does not, at least in my personal opinion. I think when I hear searing, I look more for locking in those flavor profiles that you're putting onto the meat. I don't think that searing meat effectively seals in the juices. I think you can sear in flavor. So like for me, I always sear meat usually before I cook it, depending what it is. But I'm doing that more to lock in those seasonings that I put on that meat as opposed to locking in juices, as some people say. I think the most important thing with meats that you're searing is that rest period. And that's really where you're retaining your moisture back into your meat. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's not the searing, it's the rest period after you cook a nice piece of meat to kind of let that moisture retain back into the piece of meat that you're preparing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that.
Of
And
course.
thank you for your time. I know it's not hard getting away from your day-to-day opportunities, but thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for having me.
My next guest is Chef Chris. Well, thank you for joining us, Chef Chris. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little about yourself and how you got into cooking?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Good afternoon. Well, how I got into cooking is one of those classic broke college kid stories. Went to college, realized very quickly that it was expensive, and I was putting myself through it. Needed a job, and so basically, I was asking around to some of my friends and some of my dorm mates, "Hey, you know anyone that's hiring?" And sure enough, IHOP, local to me, was looking. So I got hired there as a bus boy and a dishwasher. And long story short, there is I didn't last a whole. I think I lasted a couple months because I had to be there at 4 a.m. on the days that I didn't have class, and just wasn't for me. So ended up talking with another friend who worked at this local Italian restaurant, which he got me into. But I realized very quickly I was overwhelmed because everything was from scratch. Started there as a busser and to become a server there, which was my ultimate goal, because get the tips, get in, pay for school, and all of that fun stuff. You had to serve the general manager, the executive chef, and the bar manager, and they would have you pair wines and specialty cocktails and ask you the questions of what's in this sauce or what's in this dish. And about halfway through, they told me that I wasn't going to pass the exam. So I was just very honest with them. I said, look, I just need a job. I'll do anything. I'll wash dishes. It doesn't matter. I'm looking to get my foot in the door and learn. And so they hired me as a dishwasher instead of a server, which I was fine with. And from there, I learned the menu, retook the exam, passed it with flying colors, and just kind of fell in love with food and the creativity behind it, being able to take a dish and look at the ingredients to it, use the fresh ingredients, make everything from scratch, and make sure that the plates look really, really great. So my executive chef, Will, at the time, was a mentor to me, and I just found this passion I didn't know about when it came to cooking and the creativity that you can have working with this kind of medium. And so I just kind of fell in love with it ever since.
Wow, thank you for sharing, and what a great story on perseverance and hard work. And I guess it truly is true that when one door closes, another one opens, or whatever that old saying is. So thank you for joining us, and you really come with a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been doing this now for 14 years, and it's something that I can see myself retiring doing, because I just love the challenge of it and the reward that you feel at the end of a day.
Great. So we are going to jump right into it. And one of the things that, people say all the time is that oil and vinegar or oil and water don't mix. Is this true?
It is and it isn't. So it's one of those fun food science things. On a molecular level, by themselves, no. But if you use emulsification process or an emulsifier, they do. So an emulsifier like mustard or honey, dairy, butter, those kind of things that people use vinegar to create a dressing or to create a sauce or to create something that incorporates all of those things. And it's just more of a process thing. So adding oil to water, yeah, it will separate. But if you take a few extra quick steps to mix and use an emulsifier, it will absolutely combine. So a little bit of a myth, but not really.
Gotcha. So it's one of those where it's partly true, but also partly false if you take a little extra time to get it to mix.
Yeah, just an extra process and something that can be as quick as just adding one ingredient can really combine everything together.
Great. So another myth that we hear is it's around mushrooms, and really that you shouldn't wash them because they're going to end up soaking up and absorbing all of the water that you wash them in. So how should you use and handle a mushroom before cooking with it?
Yeah, I think another one of those sneaky cooking things, those tips for success is, yeah, you don't want to soak or overly saturate a mushroom because it will absorb the water and the moisture, and it just becomes soggy and mushy when cooking. But if you wanted to do a quick rinse right before cooking to get any excess compost or any dirt off of it, that's totally acceptable. The only caveat is, you want to make sure that you're patting them dry, and the more you remove the moisture, the better. That way you get a better finished product and a better flavor profile from it. So again, one of those things where if you do it just a little bit too much, it's going to come out wrong and you're going to wonder what happened. And if you don't do it at all, you might have some dirt or some compost in there that you may not want to have if not cleaned properly.
So it sounds like rinsing is okay, soaking not the best, but either way, making sure that you're thoroughly drying them and also getting all the dirt off
Yeah,
of them before using.
yeah, definitely don't want to soak in a lot of water because it will absorb that moisture, excuse me. But a quick rinse very quickly and patting dry to remove it will not do a lot of harm, and it will help get some of that compost off there. So that's a method that I use quite often, and I suggest to people when I go around doing trainings or partner with new locations.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing, and for informing us on some of those myths that we hear. And thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, no problem.
Next up is Chef Lance. Well, thank you, Chef Lance, for joining us today. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Thank you for having me here in the invitation. I'm Lance Franklin, one of the corporate chefs with Cura Hospitality. I've been in healthcare since 2013, and I've been cooking for a total of 25 years. Even though it may not look like it, I've been 25 years in the industry, and I've cooked in hospitals, restaurants, hotels, um, schools, and even some catering. So I've kind of seen the business on all sides here, and I've been fortunate enough to kind of gain a wide spread of experience. So it's a little bit about me professionally.
Awesome. Well, it's great having you and having your wealth of experience with us. So we're going to jump right into it. And, really, we're going to start off by talking about chili peppers and where the heat comes from in them. So are all parts of the chili pepper equally hot?
I would say no. The area around the seeds are the hottest. With some peppers, the seeds are the hottest, but with chili peppers specifically, I would say that the areas around the seeds is the hottest. They hold the most capsaicin.
So that would be that little white part that you see on the inside?
Yes,
Okay.
the flesh. Yeah, we call it the flesh sometimes.
Okay, cool. So if someone wanted to make something a little less spicy at home, how would they do that?
The first thing is I would put gloves on because sometimes that um that substance can get on your fingertips, and if you cut onions up after you cut peppers, and you start crying or your eyes water up and you wipe your eyes, that substance could get into your eyes and burn your eyes. So I would put gloves on and then carefully slice and cut up the peppers and kind of clean um some of that flesh out. I would use something maybe like a spoon or something that's not as sharp. So that way you do have an opportunity to maintain more of the body of the pepper, and then slice it down from there.
Awesome. So you kind of delved into safety a little bit. So one of the things that you hear sometimes is that sharp knives are dangerous. Uh, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree, but I tend to think of myself as more of a safety specialist. And when you're in a position of a leader, the safety of your crew is almost more important than the food that the kitchen puts out. But I'm of the mindset of a dull knife being more dangerous. A sharp knife, is going to make a clean cut. It's easier on the body to perform, but then you when you're talking about a dull knife, it's not as clean. It doesn't all the way go through what you're cutting at times, and sometimes that knife, what we say, walk away from you. That means when you're cutting on a cutting board and you go to slice something, the dullness of the blade will guide the knife into a direction that you don't want it to go in, which could be towards your body, towards your hand, or away from what you're actually cutting. So dull knives are something that we try to stay away from, and we try to teach the crew to identify those knives and the proper ways to maintain them. And we try to keep sharp knives available.
Oh, thank you for that. One last question around safety, and this is more about foodborne illness and safety. And, we know that different meats can have the potential of having, different contaminants on it. And, I just think of like chicken and salmonella. So one of the things you hear all the time is, well, rinse the chicken before you cook it, and it will help prevent a foodborne illness. Is that true? What are your thoughts on that?
It's I would say it's somewhat true. Rinsing the chicken, however, can also increase the risk of cross contamination. So you kind of have to be careful. And for me, I thought about it back in culinary school when we was doing uh, meat and seafood. We was almost we was almost uh, we was almost taught to kind of not rinse and to kind of use, if we did rinsing as a way to get the meat ready to be seasoned and cooked. So it just depends on your product, but rinsing the chicken can definitely increase cross contamination by splashing and or just the spread of that water into areas that you know may not want it in. So you have to be careful about that. You have to work clean and smart, and you have to do whatever your preference is. This has been a big online debate lately. Certain groups of people say, "Oh, you always wash your chicken," so forth and so on. And then some groups of people will say, "Oh, I don't rinse it," or "It's not a good idea to." But you have to be careful about that.
Awesome. So it sounds like, either way, if you are going to rinse your chicken, you have to make sure that you're going to clean and sanitize, the surfaces and whatever you're
Yes,
rinsing it in. But ultimately, cooking your chicken to the proper internal temperature is the way to go.
yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today, Chef Lance.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
My final guest is Chef Jason. So, welcome, Chef Jason. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into cooking?
Yeah, so my name's Jason Clark. I'm a corporate executive chef for Cura Hospitality. My culinary journey began when I was 15 years old. I started out scrubbing dishes in a small town in Pennsylvania. Soon then to be promoted to a cook. And that initial spark ignited a lifelong passion for me. After high school, I continued honing my skills in various kitchens, working under chefs who unveiled a whole new dimension of food for me. They showed me that a side of food that was more than just sustenance. It was a vibrant tapestry woven with culture, family, passion, creativity, and artistry. It was a journey with no end and a window in how shared meals could transcend backgrounds and situations, bringing people together to create lifelong memories. This is the realization that I solidified as a chef and my desire to become a chef, opening a world of travel and discovery through cuisine. And then from there, I really just became the student of culinary arts, starting my career at Le Cordon Bleu in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I traveled through variation of Hotel Hershey Resort Hotel. Then I moved on to working at a business hotel at the Hilton Hotel and Towers, running a 4-diamond restaurant in that facility for many years. And then I dabbled a little bit into casino. So I opened the Penn National Gaming Hollywood Casino in Grantville, Pennsylvania, and ran that for on and off in about 10 years. Then I got a little slice of heaven into healthcare and got to see another side of the food service industry, and then really just fell in love with the healthcare side of cooking. Ran a high-end CCR of about 900 residents with independent living, skilled assisted living, memory care. Enjoyed that very much. And then I was promoted to a position here at Cura as a corporate executive chef. And now I'm traveling the country regionally, East Coast, Midwest, and supporting all of our chefs out in the units.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Today we are going to continue spending some time on some different culinary myths that we hear. So the first one I wanted to ask you about is something that I heard a lot growing up. And that was, when you're cooking pasta, if you throw it against the wall, you'll be able to tell if it's properly cooked by if it sticks or not. Is this true?
Unfortunately, Michael, this is not true. This is a kind of a grandma's myth. I think a common Italian grandma myth. This is not an accurate way to test pasta. When pasta is al dente to the tooth, which means to the tooth in Italian, which is generally considered properly cooked, it should still have a slight firmness and resistance when bitten. And if it's sticky enough to adhere to the wall, it's likely overcooked and gummy. So likely that's overcooked. The best way to really test a piece of pasta during the cooking process is when you should have a slight texture to it. Bite into that piece of pasta. It should have no raw ring in the middle of that dough. That ensure that the pasta is cooked properly. The best way to really is to just taste the pasta, not by throwing it against the wall.
Thank you for clarifying that. And it was like you were in the room with us, because it was actually my grandmother who used to say that when I was growing up. Staying on the whole pasta trend here, one of the other things you hear is that adding some kind of oil, vegetable oil, olive oil to the pasta water helps the pasta from sticking when you're cooking it. Is this true?
Unfortunately, this is also largely a myth as well. At least not most effective method. While adding olive oil to pasta water, Michael, it might create a thin film in that water, but it's more likely to make your sauce not adhere to it as well as the pasta later. So it may not allow it slightly to maybe not stick, but what you're doing is actually allowing that pasta, when it goes into your sauce, it won't stick to the pasta. So now it's just going to fall off of it. Really what you want to do is a few steps, correct steps of, making sure when you're cooking pasta is using a large enough pot with plenty of water. Making sure that you bring that water to a boil before adding your pasta. Always make sure the water's a rolling boil. And then also make sure you're stirring it frequently during the cooking process. So that allows, as the starches are releasing from the pasta, they're not sticking to the pasta's not sticking together. And lastly, really just making sure we're testing the pasta like we talked about in the prior question, not overcooking it. Those are really the proper steps of cooking your pasta. And if you're cooking it ahead of time, then the best step is to shock it in an ice bath and a water bath, cool it down properly, and then store it in a container until later then warm back up.
Great. Thank you. And, you brought up the rolling boil and the pot of water. So I just have to ask, what about a watched pot? You hear all the time that if you watch a pot of water, it will never boil. Once again, I think I know the answer, and I think I gave you some false ones here, but what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's just how we learn from, like you said before, our grandparents, any of our parents in general, and how we learn from family cooking, and we pick up these kind of habits, regardless if they're good habits or bad habits. We pick up these habits through tradition, and unfortunately, this is another one that is an idiom, that's a non-scientific fact. It really, what it means is time seems to pass more slowly when you're impatiently waiting for something to happen. That's kind of what it's the same reference of watching paint dry. It always takes longer. A pot of water will boil at the same rate whether you're watching it or not, assuming the heat remains the constant. As an example of an opportunity to use your time wisely in the kitchen, I always say multitask when preparing menu items is a trait of a true chef. So always utilizing that time to do other things than to watch that water boil.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Chef, and thank you for taking some time out of your busy day and participating with us today.
It was my pleasure, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Cura Conversations, Tales of Hospitality Excellence. And a big thank you to Chef Paris, Chef Chris, Chef Lance, and Chef Jason for joining us today and sharing their expertise and experiences on the field of culinary arts. We hope you found our discussion on today's topic insightful and engaging. Happy Culinary Arts Month to all. And as always, until next time, happy cooking.
Since 1996, Cura has specialized in serving life plan communities, behavioral health, and acute care facilities. Cura creates dining service programs specific to each client's needs, taking the worry of guest safety and satisfaction, employee development, and operational and fiscal challenges off our clients' plates. As our clients' needs evolve, so do we. We are a company of experienced dining service professionals that is part of Elior North America. Together, we are small enough to care and big enough to make a difference. Thank you for listening to Cura Conversations, Tales of Hospitality Excellence, and we hope you will visit us at curahospitality.com to learn more about how we nurture well-being with every meal we serve.